The Dale Show! How's it going, everybody? How are you? It's just me this week. Not week, I guess. I don't do these weekly. Anyways, just me this time, this episode 31 of The Dale Show. This time we're going to talk about the Mandela Effect. Last episode, me and Jeff covered... Oh, by the way, I guess I should say Jeff's not here. He had personal issues, but it's nothing too bad. Like, he's not dying or anything. I just don't know how much he would want me to say. Anyways, he couldn't be here this episode, so I'm going to soldier on and record it by myself because it's just been... I've been thinking about the Mandela Effect pretty much since we recorded the quantum immortality episode, because in that episode we were talking about how when you have a near-death experience, your body dies, but then your consciousness might actually shift into a different timeline. And I was like, well, that's crazy, and we're talking about it. And then after we recorded the episode, I was like, wait, maybe that's where Mandela effects come from. Maybe after your consciousness slips into a new timeline, your brain, body, memories are still left over from the old timeline. And so that's why stuff's different. So I was thinking about this, and I was doing all this. I don't know if I'd call it research, but I was reading Reddit threads about the Mandela Effect, and I looked up as many as I could find. So what I'm going to do is this episode, I'm going to talk about the Mandela Effect, what I think it is, some thoughts I've had on it since I've been just basically daydreaming about it instead of doing productive stuff at work. And then I'm going to give you 68 examples. I counted. It would have been nicer if I could find 2 more to make 70, but alas, 68 was all I could find. I found a bunch of lists online. They had a whole bunch of different ones, and then I was like, every time I heard of one in passing, I put it in there. So what I'm going to do is, I already explained this, but I'm going to talk about it, and then I'm going to put those Mandela effects at the end, go through them. So this could either be a regular length episode or a super long one. And since I'm recording this by myself late at night, we'll see how much I can handle, because I want to get it all in one episode, because there'd be no point in me like talking about my impressions of the Mandela Effect and what I think it is, and then just having like, is this pregnancy pillow weird? I'm just gonna move this like, I have a baby. I don't know if I've mentioned that, so that's like a breastfeeding pillow. I don't know, maybe it's more distracting now that I took it out of the background. I'm sitting on the couch. Usually I sit at my chair, but anyways, I might as well get rid of this green thing too. It's just a big old stuffy. It's like a knockoff mushmallows, whatever those fucking stuffies are that are like $80 each. They're crazy expensive. So anyways, back on track. I'm going to leave the Afghan because I've removed too much stuff. I don't know. It's probably distracting, but I don't think I can just keep removing stuff. I mean, if you're just listening to this, I'm sorry. Go watch the YouTube to watch the super riveting me removing pillows from the background of my couch. Anyways, so this episode, I thought I would do something different. I was like, well, I'm going to record this by myself. And I know some other podcasts, they write out scripts and then they read those and they work through them, like all those like murder mystery, true crime podcasts. So I don't know if you guys know this about me. I actually went to school for journalism. I have a bachelor's degree. I have a Bachelor of Arts in journalism. So I have I'm learned about writing and stuff. But the problem is whenever I write, I ramble, just like when I'm talking to you guys. I go off on tangents. And anyway, so what I did was I started writing this down and I kept getting sidetracked and it turned into this like flow of consciousness thing. So I'm going to start by reading that because, hey, let's try it out. Let's see what happens. I mean, episode 31 of the Dale Show. Why not experiment? Why not? I mean, this could be the next level. This could be like Dale's podcast skills evolve. It only took like 300 episodes total of me doing podcasts to actually try to write something out. So anyways, this also, I kind of covered the beginning of this when I was rambling before, but okay, so I'm going to start. Okay, this is it. Okay? Okay? All right. I started thinking about how the Mandela Effect could actually be caused by quantum immortality. Last episode, me and Jeff, or Jeff and I, whatever, discussed near-death experiences and how our consciousness could be slipping into a new timeline so that our consciousness can go on in a new body instead of dying. What if when we slip into a new timeline, there are small things that are different? So as you could tell, this is already different podcasting. Like, you could tell when I'm reading as opposed to when I'm just going off the dome, making things up as I go. So, hey, let me know in the comments if you don't ever want to hear me read anything ever again. I will respect that, and I probably will read anyway, but I'll do it less, and I'll try to make less of a conscious effort to make notes. Okay, continuing. The way it makes sense to me is if your consciousness wanted to slip into a new timeline to continue experiencing physical life through our meat suits, it would most likely pick the most similar timeline. This is all wild conjecture, I don't know at this point, so it could even be something to the effect that you could only slip into the next timeline over, or one very close in proximity to the timeline you're leaving. This is also a problem of quantum thinking and timelines and woo-woo shit because I personally have to relate the timelines with physical proximity, like tubes running parallel with each other. Even something as wild as separate timelines existed, I don't really think they would be kind enough to exist as something convenient like a tube. Okay, sorry. Even if something as wild as separate timelines were to exist, I don't think they would take it easy on us and be like kind enough to exist as something convenient as a tube so you could think about it easier. But hey, I'm just trying to get a physical, like a visual representation in my brain because I'm one of those people who thinks in pictures. So when I'm trying to relate ideas, I think of them as a picture, then I express those with words. So it's like, you could see where something like when you talk about quantum stuff, it kind of gets jumbled up. Okay, so where was I? Something convenient like a tube, you can hop from one to the other. But fuck, whatever, this is an esoteric subject. And if you think about it too much, you'll get lost in the weeds and your whole mental representation will disintegrate into dust. Kind of like breaking an hourglass, but instead of the glass breaking, when you think about it too much, the glass containing the grains of sand disappears and the sand just dissipates into space, out in the universe. This is one reason why I don't write these things down. I just get caught going off on tangents like the branching lines of dividing timelines. But what if those timelines don't separate off? What if they were always their own complete timeline from start to finish? Or I guess we could say from before to later, since we don't know if it has ends. Therefore, like, we don't know if there was a start or there is an end. We don't know if there is a spot where the timeline just ends. Fuck, this is why this shit is so annoying. Disappearing glass once again. Okay. So once you get into the nearest timeline and your consciousness slips into a new meat suit, now this is one of them many problems I keep running into that leads me down a side path and pretty much gets me lost in the woods every time I try to write shit. You start with a simple idea trying to come up with most likely answer to a problem that you just run into so many more questions as you're trying to walk your way through the reasoning. It's almost like the only way to get down the path is to keep yourself dumb enough you don't keep asking yourself questions like, if we live in a simulation theory, who built the simulation? Wouldn't that just be a 1 degree of separation from our current life anyway? So yeah, basically what you want to do is when you're going down the path of, I guess, a thought process, you want to be dumb enough that you could just stay on the path. Maybe not dumb, maybe that's the wrong answer. Maybe kind of keep the blinders on so you don't like ask too many questions and end up going off to the side. Anyways, back onto the being off track. If our consciousness slips into a new timeline, what happens to the us that was already there? Is there like NPC versions of ourselves on a bunch of different timelines? Almost like a sort of spare us. Like, remember that movie The Island when it was Ewan McGregor? Ewan McGregor and that I can't remember which woman was in it. Was it Charlize Theron? I don't know. Look it up. It's a pretty good movie. Huge spoiler. It turns out that he's a clone of a super rich guy who cloned himself for basically spare parts for like organ donation and stuff because the super rich guy who cloned himself was a party animal. He drank and he smoked and he was ruining his insides. So in this like future society, these rich people would get clones of themselves and then they could get new lungs and they wouldn't have to quit smoking and all this stuff. So what if these are, or not what if, are these timelines, are there like spare versions of us? But then if you think about it like that, it would almost seem like there was always going to be us slipping into different timelines. And then this just opens stuff up. All right. I guess if a new consciousness came into our body, that would be why some people the same have personality changes. Like, you know how you're like friends with a dude for like 10 years or a woman, don't mean to gender discriminate. So you're friends with someone, and then like it just seems like they get a different personality overnight. I guess this happens more in high school, and it's probably less to do with they got downloaded a consciousness from a different timeline, and more of their synapses just grew and evolved, and their brain kind of got more complex, so their personality would become more complex. But what if one of those times someone has a different personality? It's because they're a different timeline version of themselves. Or what about schizophrenia? What if maybe the voices in someone's head are just different versions of themselves that slid in from other timelines and they weren't strong enough to take over, so they're kind of just in the back seat, and then they just sit, then they just like, you can hear these other voices in your head. Huh. But are we even allowed to say that schizophrenia is hearing voices in your head anymore? Seems like the mental illness had some new acceptable explanation made up for all of them in like 2015. Safe space and a new, more milder mental illness. Maybe that's another Mandela effect and not just a way to try to get people to use mental illness as a punchline. Okay, so what I'm going to do is like when I was recording those hockey episodes and I lost a big chunk, I will forever be breaking these recordings up into pieces. So I was thinking, should I just keep reading from my notes and try to pretend I didn't just stop? Or should I bring it up? Will that be like a narrative, like bad and like get anything? Anyways, I haven't decided. I'll probably just try to keep reading in the future because if you have to listen to me just talk about behind the scenes stuff too much on every single episode, you might not want to listen to it. So, anyways, I'm going to go back to the reading. Where was I? Oh yeah, the mental illness and the. This is probably a good place to break anyway because I was digressing back into what I was trying to say. Okay, what I was trying to say that whole time is Mandela effects could be examples of what has different in the new, what has become different. This is also why I don't write. I'm writing so fast, I just miss words. So sorry about that. The Mandela effects could be examples of what has become different in the new timeline. Like when you had a near death experience and you left a timeline where it was called Berenstain Bears and entered a timeline where it's called Berenstain Bears. But if we've just being deposited into a new timeline, then why do so many people share the same Mandela effects? It's actually the only reason they ever became a thing in the first place because so many people remembered Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 80s instead of getting out of jail and eventually becoming the president of South Africa. My totally. Oh. My totally made up, but just as legitimate as any other answer we could have all jumped into. We could have all jumped into this current timeline from a different one. This would explain why we don't all share the same Mandela effects. I mean, I don't have the OG Mandela effect. It's actually one of the reasons I compiled such a big list of them for this episode. I wanted to get all the ones I could grab to get the most people as possible because I don't have the Nelson Mandela one. Like, to me, the only reason I ever heard he was in jail was because it was such a big deal that the president had gotten out of jail and stuff. So I'd never heard he died in jail or whatever. So what I did was, of the 68 Mandela effects I grabbed, a lot of them, they don't even affect me. Like, they're not ones I think of, but I just wanted to get as many people, give them examples of one they might have. So, like, obviously there's a lot of people that have the Nelson Mandela one. Otherwise this whole effect thing wouldn't have a name. Also, I'm just going to call it the Mandela effect, and that's like just the slang term, I guess, because it's also like false memories or whatever. Because when I was looking this up, it was all like psychiatry and stuff to be like how people can get like traumatized and have false. Anyways, I'm just gonna call it the Mandela effect because it's easier and you'll all know what I'm talking about. Okay, back to the number of timelines thing. It's weird referring to timelines. It's almost always assumed there would be an infinite amount of timelines. But this doesn't make sense to me because as soon as something is infinite, it almost ceases to exist because it loses the ability to be quantifiable. Like, if there is no beginning or end, does something stop being a thing? This is what I was mentioning before when I was talking about the like hourglass breaking. Take space. If it is infinite, is it even space anymore? Yeah, there you go. Like thinking about space too much freaks me out, and it's pretty much the main reason why I can't smoke weed, because I will just have like an existential crisis every single time because I'll be like, well, we don't know how space started. How did it come from the Big Bang? And it's like, if it came from God, who put God there? Where did God come from? And so it's like one of those things where it's just easier to not think about so you don't like short circuit your brain. So, as you can see, since I have such a hard time wrapping my head around the thought of something being infinite, I prefer it to be finite, or measurable, or simply a certain amount of something. So, for timelines, I'm not sure how many there would be, but it would almost make more sense if there was less than you think. Like, it would almost make more sense if there was like arbitrarily, say, 50 timelines and you just jump back and forth between them. But this is a problem because if you're jumping back and forth between them with near death experiences, then the one you jump out of, you die. So you can't go back to that timeline. Oh, yeah. That's crazy because it's like, um, it kind of ruins my whole metaphor of the different tubes, but it would make sense if they intersected with each other as a self correcting mechanism. Really, if you could jump into another timeline, you could probably jump back and out of that one, like I was just saying. But yeah, you couldn't go back to the one of the disease. Maybe if you jump timelines, it's kind of like you run out of timelines. Oh man, this just like this is just a subject that just keeps getting bigger because I just realized this. So you jump out of a timeline during a near death experience and you get into another timeline. And like we were talking about in the quantum immortality, this only works for quick death. It doesn't work for like chronic disease like cancer or liver failure, all that stuff. So what if the main reason we can't just go on forever is because we run out of timelines? What if everybody has the option to jump into 50 different timelines? Then it almost becomes like, are these even separate timelines or is that just your life? Like, if your consciousness has 50 set up meat suits that it could just jump into when it almost dies, then those aren't separate timelines because they were always meant for you to be in them. So then that changes the whole way you'd have to think about them. And this is crazy. Like, this is just stoner talk at this point. So it's like, would they even be separate timelines, or would they just be compressed into one timeline if you're supposed to jump into them? So I'm going to read you now. That was all the notes that I had. That's another reason why honestly, that took me like an hour to write, and I just burned through them in like 15 minutes. So, man, these true crime podcasts where they write all this stuff out. I'm thinking of specifically Last Podcast on the Left, because I think Marcus writes down his whole thing and then goes through, and then Henry and Ben, I don't know if Ben's back on the show yet. Anyways, they like interject with jokes and stuff, so I guess that would stretch out how much it is. Or maybe I should have read slower. Was I reading fast? I guess I'll listen back to this and then I'll just be like, oh boy, big goof. Anyways, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you a description I got off of Wikipedia, because I give Wikipedia $20 a year, so I got to put them in every podcast, because I know some people don't trust them and they think it's fake, but to me, it's pretty much the Library of Alexandria. It's the most valuable tool on the internet. Okay. Specific false memories can sometimes be shared by a large group of people. This phenomenon was dubbed the Mandela Effect by paranormal researcher Fiona Broom, who reported having vivid and detailed memories of new coverage of South Africa, an apartheid leader Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, despite Mandela actually dying in 2013. Decades after his release, and after serving as president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999, Broom reported that perhaps thousands of other people had written online about having the same memory of Mandela's death since 2010, and she speculated that the phenomenon could be evidence of parallel realities. Scientists suggest that these are examples of false memories shaped by similar cognitive factors affecting multiple people and families, such as social and cognitive reinforcement of incorrect memories or false news reports and misleading photographs that influence the formation of memories based on them. I'll mention this in a couple of the Mandela effects when I list them, but like, a lot of people are poo-pooing Mandela effects, and they're like disproving them, to being like, well, you probably thought it was this because it was that. But the whole point of Mandela effects is you remember it being something when it clearly wasn't. So it's like, you almost can't even disprove a Mandela effect, because it's like Bernstein and Berenstain Bears. It's like, it's always been Berenstain. Well, yeah, it always has in this timeline. I have no proof that it was Berenstain Bears, because we left that timeline and we're into another one. So it's almost like, oh. And then like there's like different explanations of like, okay, so let's just skip past all the, hey, Mandela effects, false memories, blah blah blah. Let's just assume it's a real thing, because that's way more fun, and let's just theorize of what it could be. Some people think it's a glitch in the system of a simulation theory. I personally hate simulation theory, and I don't believe in it, because it's like people use simulation theory to explain all the weird nuances in life, and they're like, well, it's because we're in a computer. And then it's like, it's almost like a cop out explanation to get past the whole God question. But to me, like I was saying before in the notes I took, I didn't explain it or expand on it, but to me, it only gets you one degree of separation from the whole God question, because it's like, okay, so we're in a simulation theory and we're in a computer. But if you go to say, like, hey, where'd that computer come from? Who built it? Then you're back up one level into the regular world, where all the same existential questions exist. So simulation theory doesn't explain where God came from. It just gets you one degree lower. Anyways, another explanation, and I came across these, like, some of these were on Reddit and some of them I just saw on, like, online or Twitter, but this one I liked. It's could the Mandela effect be from time travelers going into the past? And then when it's like the movie Butterfly Effect, like when you step on a butterfly in the past. No, wait, that's not. It's not because you step on the butterfly. It's the beating of a butterfly's wings in the past can have dramatic effects on the future. So it's like if somebody time traveled into the past and changed something, would that make Fruit Loops be spelled different now? It could. And that would also explain how it feels like some Mandela effects fade over time. Like you're not as emotionally invested in them as time goes on and you kind of get used to the idea. That's true. And another thing I was thinking of, it's like, so this could kind of relate to the time travelers. These are like the thoughts I've been having since we did the whole quantum immortality thing. Because another thing I was thinking about, it just dawned on me, is like, what if Mandela effects didn't start in 2012? One of the theories of the Mandela effects was in 2012, the first time they turned on CERN, the Large Hadron Collider in, was it Sweden, Switzerland? One of the two. The first time they turned that on, which was coincidentally was one of the reasons people thought that 2012 would be the end of existence, because that's when the Mayan calendar ran out. But I think if you listen to Graham Hancock, which I always bring up, I think he said that the end of the Mayan calendar was just the dawning of a new age. Like we're going into the age of Aquarius now, or are we just leaving? Yeah, no, we're going into the age of Aquarius. Anyways, you could also go see that on my big, I think it was the pyramid episode where I talk about all that celestial stuff and like the leaning of the axe. Anyways, I explain all like the big years and stuff and going, I can't remember all the words right now. I wasn't prepped to talk about it right now. So, um, yeah. So another thought I had, which was why I got on this, was what if Mandela effects have always been around and they didn't start in 2012? What if this is why we don't, or not we don't, this is why cultures and tribes have always put such a high importance on oral traditions? Because if you have something like time travelers who are just going to go back and change the past, that would change the physical things around you. And for, I don't know, I'd have to come up with like a spiritual explanation, which I don't know if I could do it on the fly. Maybe it's your consciousness actually protects your brain. Okay, let's just come up with it. So maybe this would also explain the slipping timelines theory. Maybe your consciousness protects your memory. So like say your soul being in your body keeps all your memories the way they are. So if your soul slips into another timeline, then it doesn't have that protection on your brain and it all gets changed by like time travelers changing the past. This is such a brilliant idea I just came up with on the fly. Man, I got to remember all this so I can like come up with like an anime series or something. So anyways, so maybe these tribes with these oral traditions, they've like already seen time travelers, because time, if you go in the past, you can go way to the past, and they saw how they would change words and pictures and concrete stuff, but they knew that their consciousness would protect their brain, so they would teach people in oral traditions, and they would be the ones who would like memorize stories and stuff, because that way, with the consciousness protecting the brain, that person would know the truth from the past. Maybe we should be doing this right now, since people could go back and change the internet. We should go back to an oral tradition. Oh man, and then what could happen was if you're a time traveler and you wanted to change the past, but you knew oral traditions were protecting it by the consciousness, you could come up with a way to shoot someone's consciousness into a different timeline so you could change the past. Oh man, this anime series is writing itself. And another weird thing that came up on Reddit was somebody was saying that druids don't trust the written word, so they had a huge importance for oral traditions and stuff. But to me, this might be less of a druids knew about time travelers and that stuff could be changed. So, and more of a they were a secret society, and if people found a note that they had scribbled, they'd all be murdered. So maybe they just kept it oral traditions because they didn't want people to find out what they were doing. Although druids knowing magic, oh man, this could be another effect. Like, so you have druids, and they're like a secret protector class of this like oral tradition and the real history and stuff. And then let's say you get like David Icke lizard aliens who are using the moon to shoot beams into people. Oh my God, this thing just keeps getting bigger. So they're just shooting beams from the moon into people's brains to try to dislodge that consciousness so they could change the past so that people would be willing to have served the lizard men masters. Oh man, Netflix, get somebody who can draw to make this anime series. Okay, so I want to move on to the list of all the Mandela Effects, the 68 that I've accumulated. I'm just worried I might have missed something I wanted to talk about since I'm doing this in all pieces and it's jumbled, but I'm sorry to keep bringing it up. And even though I said I wouldn't, anyways, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go through the list of 68 examples of Mandela effects, and then I'm going to quit recording. And then tomorrow when I'm done, I'm going to remember all the stuff I wanted to talk about, and then I'm just going to be upset. I mean, hey, if that happens, I'll do a part 2, but I think I got it. I think I got it. I got everything. Okay. So I was going to put these in order of my favorites, but I also didn't want to do that because then you'd get like the first chunk would just be all dumb, annoying ones that don't matter. So I left it in a random order. It was basically as I found them, I'd throw them in here. So the first Mandela effect is in the movie Legally Blonde, the car she drives is black, and a lot of people remember it as pink. I don't remember this movie well enough. I know I've seen it, but I don't even remember what the car they're talking about. Number 2. I shouldn't have numbered this. Okay, I'm not going to say 2 or the next one, but I'm just going to say in Top Gun, he says, "Talk to me, Goose," but he doesn't say, "You're my eyes, Goose." The movie the movie is cats and dogs, not cats versus dogs. I honestly, to me, I thought this might have been like a rebrand. Like, it's kind of a family movie, so they didn't want it to make it seem like they were fighting. But the whole thing is like a secret, like spy war between cats versus dogs. So I thought maybe the whole that might be the where it comes from. But I remember it being cats versus dogs. But I'm thinking maybe they had a focus group and they changed it to cats and dogs because that's a more colloquial saying or whatever. Anyways, the eBay logo doesn't have a capital B like the current one. What somebody said, one of the defunct or the defunk. No, that's not the right word. Debunk. One of the ways they debunked this was the original eBay logo had a big B. I don't remember this or whatever. And the next one is Funyons is spelt Funyons, not Funyons like onions with an F on the front. It's Interview with the Vampire, not Interview with a Vampire, which Interview with a Vampire. Yeah, to me it feels like it was a but I can't vision the title in my mind, so I can't say strongly which way or the other. In the Jungle Book, there's this part where Baloo the bear, he's dancing around and he's wearing like a coconut mouth. I don't know, he dressed up in disguise or something. And some people remember him wearing a coconut bra, but he doesn't. I don't remember this part of the Jungle Book, so yeah. This next one though, it totally hit me. In Super Mario, the first game, when you're running through and you get to the end of the level and you're like, "Oh, sweet." And then it just turns into be shitty Toad and he's like, "Sorry, but our princess no, he says, "Sorry, but the princess is in another castle." He doesn't actually say that. He says, "Our princess is in another castle," which there's no way he said that. He always said the princess. I swear to God, I could see it in my brain. Anyways, another one is Raggedy Ann doesn't have freckles. I mean, this is like, what is Raggedy Ann from like the 50s? I don't know. Sure. Mike Tyson never bit a chunk off of Holyfield's ear. He just made it bloody. And this is a weird one because I can kind of remember a piece being bitten out of the bottom, but this is one of those things where it's like in the 80s and 90s there was so much satire on stuff that happened, and the satire would always be exaggerated that sometimes I'm like, is this a Mandela effect or am I just remembering the satire version? But I'm pretty sure like there's enough people saying that he bit a piece out so that they remember it. So yeah. This next one is just dumb. So the cartoon movie Sword in the Stone, in the movie the sword is in an anvil, but they keep referring it to like, oh, you pulled the sword out of the stone. Like, this one's so annoying to me because it doesn't even make sense that it would be in an anvil. Like, why would you put like the tale and the legend is the sword was in a stone. The show is called Sword in the Stone. Like, why would an anvil be called a stone? So why was it in? I don't know. It's like, yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me. Uh this one, Curious George has no tail in the cartoon, which I remember him having a tail because I had a Curious George when I was a kid. Like, it was like one of my first stuffies. And this is bad because I'm a toy destroyer. I don't know if you guys ever met anybody. It's like there's this weird urge in me when I was a kid. I would just break all my toys. And I had a Curious George and I loved it, but I cut off his tail and I cut off the brim of his hat. And then I don't know why I did it. I also like cut off a bunch of his fur so he had bald spots. And then I had this other like weird, this like stuffed type. Maybe it's like some form of like OCD because I remember I had this tiger and I took it everywhere with me. And this one time I would like just whip it around by the tail. And I remember hanging it out the car window and we're driving and I accidentally let go. I might have even on purpose let go just to see what would happen. And my dad got choked and he had to stop and he had to go back. Anyways, so I remember I was playing in the sandbox with my stuffy, which is one. I was only like 4 years old, but you shouldn't be playing with your stuffed animal in a toy box. And I remember he had a little hole, and I remember the hole bugged me. So I stuck my fingers in, I just ripped it in half. I don't know if this is a false memory or I'm like just pretending I was the Hulk as a little kid, but yeah. Oh yeah. So, anyways, yeah, that's the story of me cutting my stuffies up. I don't know. Sorry. It's funny because I have a daughter now. She's like 7 months old, and she was like on the couch, and I was sitting with her, and I kept giving her a toy, and she would lean over the side of the couch and just drop it. And I was like, is this like you're dropping it to see what happens, or you just don't want to hold it anymore? And then it kind of reminded me of my whole childhood when I would just like throw things out of the window of the second story of our house just to see what happened, to see if it would break. Because I'd be like, I wonder if this would break if I dropped it out of the second story window. And then it's just like some weird thing where you're like, the curiosity just kind of gets at you. You're like, well, now I got to find out. So, anyways, um, so the show Sex is actually called Sex and the City and not Sex in the City, which I remembered as Sex in the City because as if this is more of like a reasoning, like Sex and the City doesn't make sense from like an editorial column, because the whole point of the show was she was a journalist and she wrote about having sex with all these dudes. So it would be like she would have sex. It was like kind of like the sex she was having in New York. So it was like Sex in the City, but it could have been Sex in the City. I don't know. I remember it as being Sex in the City, but this might be one where it just makes more sense to me personally that it's Sex in the City. Uh, Next one is Febreze, is Febreze, and not Breeze, like, because Breeze has Breeze, so you would just assume Febreze would be that. But now I'm starting to think if I've been calling it Febreze and it's supposed to be called Febreze, like it's easy. So I don't know. That's this one bugged me. I don't remember either way because I don't ever like I can't picture the word Febreze in my head. So it's the only way my memory works, which is I don't know weird. But anyways, so the next one is the first example of what some people call a Mandela Effect flip, where it's like you remember it as being one way and then it changes, but then it changes back. So Oscar Mayer Wieners, it's Oscar Mayer and not Meyer. But this is one where people are saying it could have started as Mayer, but they were saying Meyer, so so it flipped to Mayer, and then it flipped back. Or no, wait, this would be its yeah, this would be it started as Oscar Mayer, flipped to Oscar Meyer, and then flipped back to Oscar Mayer. Yeah. The Skechers shoes. There's no T in Skechers, and I remember this one because I remember noticing there was no T in Skechers and just being like, "Huh, I thought that name had a T in it. Maybe they rebranded this." And it's funny because on Reddit and everything, you'll see this happen a lot where people will recognize like the instance they can remember a Mandela effect, but they always like for brand names, they're always like, well, maybe they just changed it as a rebrands time of thing. This next one's hard to explain because it's like you kind of got to see this famous because there's this famous portrait of King Henry. I think it's King Henry VIII, and he's holding a turkey leg in the portrait. But if you go look at it now, he's not holding a turkey leg. You know those crackers, Cheez Its? They're actually called Cheese It with no Z on the T, which is weird because you'll be like, hey, can you give me a box of Cheez It? Like when you have food, I feel like they naturally call them like a pluralized name just so it's not awkward. Like when you say, "Hey, can I have some Oreos or an Oreo?" Wait, does the box of Oreos anyway, okay. Anyways, it doesn't have a Z. Now that I'm talking about Oreos, so it's double stuffed Oreos with one F. And I always thought it was double stuff with two F's is like shortened for double stuffed, or there's twice as much stuff in them. Mm. Um, Flint Stones is wrong. There's only one T in it, so it's actually Flynn Stones. Which this is one of those ones where it doesn't make sense to me because it's like you have the Flintstones, like Barney Rubble, like they're named after rocks. So you would have Flint Stone, like that would be the name of the stone. So Flint Stones doesn't actually make sense. Whatever. Um, Chartreuse is a shade of green and not actually a shade of pink. This one, I never really got this one because it's like one of those things. Which there's another one, I think it's mauve or something, where it's like you think one color is in one color family. Like mauve, I always thought was like red and then it turned out to be brown or something. There's another one like that where it's like it's kind of like chartreuse is like it's not a very spoken it's not a color you talk about a lot. So when you find out, like, even if this was a Mandela effect and I found out chartreuse was green and I thought it was pink, I wouldn't say anything because I would just think it was me being stupid and not knowing the proper name for a color. So I would just be like, sure, it's always been green. I thought it was pink, but whatever. uh in the movie Forrest Gump, he says, Mama always said life was like a box of chocolates. And a lot of people think he says, Mama always said life is like a box of chocolates. But it's like, this is a weird, like, past tense thing where it's like he said, Mama always said life was like. So it's like, it's kind of like the past tense in the sentence is also him talking about the sentence being said in the past tense. Like, if he were to say, my mama always says life is like a box of chocolates. So it's like, so my whole point is this, like, it could be correct either way, but yeah, that's one I never really picked up on. Um, and it's one of those ones where it's like when you think about it, you're like, wait, was it? And it, like, some of these Mandela effects, I think about them and I remember them one way and they're the other, but it doesn't surprise me because it's like, oh, I guess I just didn't remember that properly. This one, though, I do remember because in Snow White, the witch says, magic mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? But I remember it as her being mirror, mirror on the wall because I remember there's this, like, this could also be one of those ones where it's like the satire and mocking of it changed it because I remember, so, like, it was almost like a cliche or a meme to say mirror mirror on the wall, and like people would joke about it in sitcoms in the 80s and stuff. So yeah. Oh, this other one. So in the movie Lord of the Rings, when they're in the, like, basement of, not the basement, they're in the cave and the Balrog comes and they're fighting it and they're running across that thing, and then Gandalf does the "you shall not pass," and then he turns around, and then the Balrog whips his leg, and then as Gandalf is hanging on the edge, I always thought he just said, "Run, you fools," but he says, "Fly, you fools," which, why would you tell them to fly unless this was like, so this could be one where it was like always fly, but it just didn't make sense to say fly. But then, like, you get into it and you have the whole, like, eagles conspiracy theory about Lord of the Rings, and like people are like, why didn't they fly with the eagles or whatever? This could be an Easter egg preemptively to that where he's saying fly, you fools, like, hey, take the eagles, and he, like, kind of gave him a hint, but I don't know. Anyways, uh, in the movie Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter says, "Good morning, Clarice," not "Hello, Clarice." This could also be one of those satire ones where, like, on Saturday Night Live, the joke was he said hello. I can't remember specifically, and I haven't watched that movie in years, so. Oh, and this one, so the song "We Are the Champions" is like, we are the champions, we are the champions. No time for losers because we are the champions. I swear to God, like, this was actually the first cassette tape I ever had was Classic Queen, because there's Classic Queen and it was blue, and then there was Queen's Greatest Hits and it was like magenta. Classic Queen was the first tape I ever bought because I was like in grade 7, so I was 12, and my mom said I could buy it because she really liked Queen. And this is actually a funny thing that you probably don't know about me is I was actually kind of sheltered as a child. I wasn't allowed to watch movies and stuff unless my parents watched them first. So anyways, I was allowed to buy this cassette tape because my mom was very familiar with Queen and knew them, and my dad liked them, and my dad actually, in his, like, dude pool room. He had a pool table and he had the poster for Fat Bottom Girls, and it was like a topless girl on a bike. And I remember when I was like a little kid being like, yeah, my dad's cool. He got naked ladies on a wall. Anyways, so I remember this song as in like at the end of the song, he just says, "Of the world," like at the end of We Are the Champions. But apparently that never happens. So I should actually go back and listen to that because, yeah, anyways. Mr. Rogers says it's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, not in the neighborhood, which I never, spoiler, or not even a spoiler, just a weird fact. I've never seen an episode of Mr. Rogers. I've only ever seen like the 10-second clips that people have on stuff when they're talking about it. Oh man, I hope this list of all of these isn't too gruesome to get through. Okay. Here's one that this one just kind of like makes me feel dumb, but also validated at the same time. Because I remember as a kid that this could also be a flip flop. Because I remember as a kid, I was like, heard there's like in Canada, we don't learn too much about the states. It's kind of like you only learn in passing or what you see on TV and stuff. So I remember when I was a kid, I had heard there was 50 states. And then I was like, all right, that's a nice round number. That's pretty cool. And then something happened where I said there was 50 states out loud in like grade 6 or something. I was like, no, there's, and someone was like, no, there's 52. And I was like, oh, it's because I didn't count Hawaii and Alaska. So there must be 52, including those two. But there isn't. There's only 50, including those two, which is weird because I remember the saying like 50 continental states, but I also remember now that I'm thinking about it, I remember the term the lower 48 as in which could well it might not even be referencing what I'm talking about. So, and I asked a friend of mine, she's like, "No, there's always been 50 cuz she's from America, but I don't know." And this is the problem. It's like when you're talking about Mandela effects, you have to talk to like 10 different people because like she could have been in this timeline before I slipped in, so there's always been 50 states for her. Or yeah, anyways. This next one, it's he's Smokey Bear, not Smokey the Bear. Uh, I I don't get it involved in those ones. They're just maybe there was a the, maybe there wasn't. This other one is kind of funny because in the Tiananmen Square tank massacre video, I remember as a kid there was a guy and he waved a little white flag and like basically I think Tiananmen Square was China was trying to take over something in China. I can't remember. But anyways, these tanks are rolling into Tiananmen Square and there's protesters and this guy stands in front of the tank and it was like this big it was like I remember it always being a big deal to see the Tiananmen Square tank guy because it was this guy standing in front of a tank. And I never really got as a kid why it was such a big deal, but it turns out like that guy got run over by the tank, and then a bunch of people saw this video like when it first came out in like it was in black and white, so it was pretty old. So I guess a lot of these people were traumatized. So then they like edited the video clip whenever they showed it, and it always ended before the guy got ran over. But now, apparently, if you watch the full version, the guy never got run over. But this could also be a Chinese re edit because I know with the propaganda of the current Chinese government, they are saying nothing bad happened at Tiananmen Square. And they're trying to, like, just basically ham fistedly change the history. So it might not even be a Mandela effect. Like, it might still be that the guy got ran over by the tank, but the Chinese government released a different version of the video. Anyway, some people say they don't remember Neil Armstrong dying in 2012. I can't say that this is one of those ones I don't know, like sure. Billy Graham died in 2018. I don't really know. The Challenger shuttle explosion was in January of 1986 and not 84 or 85. I mean, January always feels like the year before, so January 86 would feel like 1985, I guess. But I remember the Challenger explosion being said in 1985. I don't know. The Lindenberg baby was found dead, and the kidnapper was sentenced to death for the horrible crime. But a lot of people, and me, kind of vaguely remembers it as being an unsolved mystery where they never found the Lindenberg baby. Because I remember it being referred to as like a mystery. It's like, oh, where's the body of Jimmy Hoffa or the Lindenberg baby? Like, we'll never know. Another one is Patrick Swayze died after he, like, right after pretty much he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. But some people, including me, remember that he, like, was getting better. But this could also be like when people have really bad cancer, they show recovery and then they have a huge regression. This could also be part of the whole. Oh no, wait, because quantum immortality isn't affected by slow death. So I don't know. Yeah. DiCaprio's first Oscar was in 2016. Some people think it was before that. I just remember it being that DiCaprio never got an Oscar before that, and it was like a big, oh, he's being snubbed or whatever. The castle in Disney's Magic Kingdom is not at the entrance to the Magic Kingdom. I'm not a Disney guy, so I don't know. I've never been there. Never really want to go there. This next one, Field of Dreams. Apparently, I always remember it as like, if you build it, they will come. But now it's, if you build it, he will come, which is dumb because you were never supposed to know that his father would show up, because that was supposed to be like a whole happy side effect that he didn't know was going to happen. So if it says, if you build it, he will come, that's kind of like a spoiler, isn't it? I mean, if you ask me. Another movie one. This one might actually affect me the most. It's also because I only heard it a week ago. But in the movie Risky Business, Tom Cruise, like, his parents go away, so he turns up the dials on all the, like, music, and then he slides across the hardwood floor in a white button-up dress shirt, no pants, in his socks, wearing sunglasses. But now if you go back, he's not wearing the sunglasses in that. And that is just F's with me, because, like, I remember this being like everybody dressing like this on like SNL, and like people dressing up as it for like Halloween and stuff, and they always had the glasses. This next one is also one I very strongly believe in. Fruit of the Loom logo used to have a cornucopia behind all the fruit. Fruit Loops, this is another example of a flip flop, because it said it was it started as fruit, like FROOT, so you'd have like loops, so you'd have four little loops. But then it went to spelled fruit the proper way, UIT, but now it's back to OOT. Um in the video for Britney Spears Hit Me One More Time, her skirt is black. I remember it as being plaid, and a lot of other people remember it as being plaid. And the another one, here's two Britney Spears in a row. For the video for Oops, I Did It Again, a lot of people remember her wearing a headset mic, and they also released a Barbie or a doll of her wearing like the red outfit with a headset mic. The Cinderella castle is in Walt Disney World in Florida. The blue and pink castle in California's Disneyland is Sleeping Beauty's. I guess people got that backwards. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a Disney guy. Oh, this one's a big one, because this was like back in the 80s and 90s, before we had the internet. If there was a pop culture reference, it was beaten into you, and everybody referenced it. It was weird because it was like, stuff was so popular that everybody would reference it, and it was basically like quoting Wayne's World or something. Like everybody had watched it and everybody referenced it as kind of like shorthand to, like, you would say, like, it's almost like memes now, but if everybody knew them, is like you had the shorthand to expressing a bigger idea by just mentioning something. And one of those was Ed McMahon for Publishers Clearinghouse. And you'd always joke like, "Oh, maybe Ed McMahon will come to my house with a giant check and I won't have to go to work tomorrow." And like people would always make jokes like that. But the thing is, Ed McMahon never worked for Publishers Clearinghouse, and there was never a commercial where he gave someone a giant check, which is wild. This next one, I kind of don't know if I don't know if it counts as a Mandela effect or just a misquote, but I put it in anyway because in Casablanca, he says, "Play it once, Sam, for old time's sake." And he never actually says, "Play it again, Sam." But this was always like a piece of like movie trivia for a misquoted line. Another one in movies was in Jaws. He says, "You're going to need a bigger boat," not "We're going to need a bigger boat." But I remember him saying, "We're going to need a bigger boat." And a funny side note is Richard Dreyfuss in Jaws. That's how all the hipsters are dressing. I don't know if they're kind of over it, but this was like the last 2-3 years, like boat shoes, too, wide rim glasses. It's funny because sometimes you'll watch like a 70s movie and you'll have like Richard Dreyfuss in this movie who's supposed to be like the not cool guy, like the whiner guy, the comedic side note, and then everybody just like dresses like him and trying to be cool. This next one, I don't remember, but in the Black Eyed Peas song "Boom Boom Pow," it was released in 2008. More wasn't released in 2008, but it was in 2009. And in the lyrics, Fergie doesn't sing "I'm so 2008, you're so 2000 and late." She says, "I'm so 3000 and late, you're so 2000 and late," which doesn't make sense. So I could guess why people would think she would say 2008, because why would she reference 3008? Like, I don't know. In I Love Lucy, Ricky Ricardo never said, "Lucy, you have some splaining to do," but he said, "Splain that if you can," and Lucy, splain. I mean, this is an old one. I'm not going to go watch I Love Lucy. When Sally Field won an Oscar for Places in the Heart in 1985, she never said, "You like me, you really like me." What she really said was, "I can't deny the fact that you like me. Right now, you like me." This could also be one of those ones with the satire, because I remember in Animaniacs, Dot said, "You like me, you really like me," and maybe I thought maybe that could be where I got it from, but I don't know. Joan Jett said, "I saw him standing there by the record machine in I Love Rock and Roll," but what she actually says is, "I saw him dancing there by the record machine." I mean, if you're referencing a cool guy, cool guys don't dance, so maybe that's what it was. Mickey Mouse has a tail that like is long and thin like a mouse. I kind of remember it being a ball tail, like a puff. Oh. In the movie Wizard of Oz, she says, "Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore," instead of "I don't think we're in Kansas anymore." I think was in the original series or the movies, Kirk has never said "Beam me up, Scotty." Like the aforementioned Berenstain Bears instead of Berenstein Bears. Mother Teresa was canonized as a saint in 2016, not the 90s. This one doesn't affect me because I remember when it happened, and I remember being like, I thought you had to perform a miracle to be a saint, and I didn't know what miracle Mother Teresa had performed. The Mandela died in prison. Okay, there's a Pokemon named Onyx, and apparently it's spelled Onix, but I distinctly remember it being Onyx. not like the stone, but like the rack group, because I remember playing Pokemon Go and I caught an Onyx and I was like, oh damn, this Pokemon's hard as fuck, because it was like the gangster rap group Onyx. Um Looney Tunes is spelled Tunes, not tunes like cartoon. 3 3PO from Star Wars has a silver leg from the knee down, which I swear I never saw, and I feel like I would have noticed that as a kid, because it would have bugged me, because I notice when stuff doesn't fit with the hole. I remember in the prequels, one of his legs didn't have a cover. Oh, you know what? Maybe in the prequels he has a silver leg, so they went back and changed. I don't know, but I definitely remember him being fully gold. Jif Peanut Butter only has one F. Apparently, the Mona Lisa supposedly used to have a bigger smirk than she does now. The Shazam logo, or not Shazam, the Kit Kat logo used to have a dash in it. It doesn't anymore. Pikachu has a black tip on his tail. I remember this, but apparently it's just all yellow. This is the biggest one that anyone ever talks about, and it was Shazam with the comedian Sinbad in it. And I remember this because I remember Kazam with Shaq came out later, and I was like, why would they have the same movie that they just made with Sinbad? And then apparently it never happened. And it's funny because Sinbad has been commenting about this, and he says that, I think it was like in the 90s, he said everybody started asking him about it. But yeah, that this one's wild to me, because I definitely remember Sinbad being in Shazam, because if he wasn't in the movie Shazam as a child, why would I have known who Sinbad was? I wasn't watching stand-up comedy, and I wasn't watching adult TV. I just remember him being in that show and liking it and being like, "Oh, that's like an adult comic guy. Like he's like from the adult world, but now he's making a kid movie." This next one also effed me up a lot. The Monopoly Man has no monocle, and I swear to God he had a monocle. Uh, Darth Vader told Luke Skywalker, "Luke, I am your father." But that's not what he said. What he actually said was, "No, I am your father." Because Luke says, "Don't blah blah blah, don't talk about my father. You killed him." And then Darth Vader turns and goes, "No, I am your father." But like, this is another one of those things where it was referenced so much as Luke, I am your father, that it could have just been misreferenced once. I don't know. I don't know why I'm debunking these, because it was clearly used to be Luke, I am your father, since there's so many references to it as that. Um this last one, I have no idea what it is, but did uh it was one of the referenced ones in the Wikipedia article, and I included it because A, it's the last one, and B, I just wanted to put in as many as I could. But there's a clock at the also, I think I wanted to put it in because in I think it's in Italy, but there's like, do we call it Bologna, Italy, or is it Bologna, Italy, or is it Bologna, Italy? Because when you have the meat for the sandwich, we call it bologna, but it's spelled Bologna. So I'm not well traveled. I've never been to Italy myself. But do we call it Bologna, Italy? Or or do we only call it bologna when it's the sandwich meat? Anyways, at Bologna Central Railway Station, there's a clock that was supposedly damaged in the Bologna Massacre bombing in August in 1980. And they had said that the clock stopped then, but it never did. The clock, they kept the clock going. Or there's something like the I just like saying the Bologna Massacre, honestly. I could just talk about Bologna Massacre for an hour. No, I can't because I don't actually know anything about it. I just want to say Baloney Massacre over and over until you unsubscribe from this podcast, basically. But in this Baloney Massacre, apparently this clock was damaged in August of 1980, and a lot of people were claiming it was never fixed, but it was running the whole time. And then later on, to commemorate the Baloney Massacre, they actually stopped the clock for a year or whatever. So that's it. That's them all. I think I just melted my brain talking about all 68 of those. Hopefully, I will put the list of every single one of those in the show notes so that if I was garbled when I was talking to them, or because a lot of these, it makes more sense to read them because it's weird because there's a lot of like brand logos and brand titles of stuff. So yeah, if you are listening to this and you want to watch it, go to YouTube. I mean, I'm not going to put I'm not going to put photo examples of this because I don't want to spend a year photoshopping logos and stuff for them all, but just check out the show notes. I'll have them all listed. Yeah, and if I think of anything else I wanted to talk to about the Mandela Effect, I will maybe make like a mini episode follow up. But I just really wanted to talk about that whole plot of that anime I was talking about, where it was like all this like woo woo stuff, like the druids not writing stuff down, and then like the Mandela Effect. Because I've been thinking about this ever since we recorded the quantum immortality episode. So yeah, let me know what you think. And oh yeah, I guess I should say follow me on Twitter, SuperDalebot. You can email me at OutrageFactPod just because I have one email set up for the other podcast. Patreon, I think, is the Dale Show. Hit me up. I have I have the tier set up so that when you pay a certain amount a month you get like stickers or mugs or a hoodie. But if you want some swag, there's a link in the show notes for the swag. Or if you yeah, or if you just want to talk to me, just comment underneath this episode either on YouTube or I don't know if you can comment on Spotify. But yeah, I put these up on what used to be called Anchor. Now it's called Spotify for podcasters. I don't know. They changed it. It's super annoying. I had to like kind of eke my way through to navigate it last time I was posting episodes. So hopefully it's a little bit easier this time. And thanks for your time.